category of life matters, welcome to Unapologetically You, a title created for today's topic in which we uncover our opinion on trauma. Today, I have with me an amazing, insightful friend I've known for over 35 years. We've had our ups and downs like all relationships, but the fact we are here today to tell the tale is a testament to a long-standing, unique friendship I value. A warm welcome to Marilyn. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Pleasure, pleasure. Before we go into this topic is going to be about trauma.
Yeah.
And a very quick waiver. Marilyn, what Marilyn says is Marilyn's opinion. We're not saying we're experts in any way, shape, or form. And the same with me, just because I say something, Marilyn might not necessarily agree with me. So what I'm saying is my opinion as well. So I thought I'd get that waiver out of the way. So let's definitively start. So what does the word trauma mean to you, Marilyn?
Trauma means an event in somebody's life that would have caused them a trauma, a hurt, a slight in any capacity that would be pertaining to the person that is relevant to them. What is one trauma to you may not be the same trauma to somebody else, but trauma in itself is an event that happens in a person's life that can either change the trajectory, of the person's life, and they learn to work through it, or it becomes part of who they are, believing that it's part of who they are. Because a lot of the times when people do or have experienced trauma, it is a way of them dealing with it in the aftermath that becomes an aspect of what they've received from it. That's what I would say trauma is, in my understanding of what it is for me.
Excellent answer. Amazing answer. For me, to be honest, I never really thought much about what trauma is. I initially what word would I use? Probably could be childishly, really. I used to think trauma meant a trauma to the body. And I think the reason why I thought that was because I've actually had a trauma to my body myself, i.e. An accident in terms of when I played, contact sports. I played lots of sports, even football, for example, and more fairly recently, netball. I'll say recently, but I mean a couple of years ago. And I actually experienced a trauma. And I didn't even know that was a trauma until when I actually go to hospital to do with that. When I looked at the paperwork, they said she suffered a trauma. So to be honest, that's how I looked at the word trauma. But when things happened in terms of, I'm going to say 2020 and the lockdown, and there was just so much about mental health around that time, then the word trauma came about. And that's when I started to realize, oh, trauma isn't just a physical thing. It's a mental thing. I mean, obviously, if I looked at the dictionary, I'd know that trauma is also, mental as well. But yeah, in all honesty, I always thought trauma as something physical, not necessarily something mental.
Yeah. That's more, I hear what you're saying. That's more to do with a medical term, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? That they would use the word trauma.
Yeah.
And like you said, when you mentioned in what's happening recent times, in the word trauma, when you're younger and you experience anything, you understand it to be trauma now. But at the time, you didn't understand what it was because you wouldn't have had the tools, emotional tools, to understand exactly what that was, exactly what it is, and how it affects you until you become older and you understand in what capacity that may affect you. But at the time, you're just surviving whatever slights that you may have during your childhood, as opposed to understanding it as trauma at the time.
Yeah, I hear you. But Then we're going to move on to the next question because that might open things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you recall any traumatic experiences from your childhood that you're open to discuss?
Yeah, there are quite a few traumas. There's abandonment, I would say, is one of them. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Something that comes to my mind, do let me know if you want to elaborate on what you said, and I don't want to cut you, but
Yeah,
something that comes to my mind, trauma wise, is when I think we were living in a new house, we were doing Bible studies, um, something I despised, if I'm to be honest. And I think I gave the impression that I despised it. And then the person that was teaching us, about God and everything else, that person said, "You're the type of person to be walking in the devil's footsteps if you aren't doing that already." And from the time that person said that to me, I just saw myself as a bad person. Um, and that kind of had an effect on me in a way. It's almost to say, because someone who I sort of saw in authority, shall I say, said something, then I take that on board as if to say, that's the truth. Because when I was doing certain things, I always took it that I'm walking in the devil's footsteps. Yeah. So
so it's
that's something.
based on somebody else's view of you not kind of being interested at the time in terms of Bible studies. That's what you would be doing, walking in the devil's footsteps, and based on that, you kind of took it on board and ingested that as your own truth. When in actual fact, it may not have been your truth at all. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you just took it, like you said, on the authority that it was the
Correct.
person authority who's telling you that it must be true. And I mean, how old was you? I mean, was you young and they were an adult?
I'm going to say 6 or 7. If we were in Robin Gardens, actually. So yeah, 6 or 7, around that age.
Yeah, because they're adults and we're children, you're a child at the time, you would take that on board as, they're an authority, they know more than you, and what they're saying must be true. But as you get older, you kind of, you know, if you start to look into yourself and kind of start looking at what you are about and what you aren't about, then you can kind of rubbish it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know?
It just made me frightened to go to sleep. It made me scared of the dark. Every time I sort of walk past an open door at night, I was petrified. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Because obviously the devil wasn't thought highly of in terms of the Bible. So I thought, if I'm going down that road, then what am I going to become, kind of thing. So
yeah,
I don't know if that was traumatic though. That's the only thing.
yeah.
Um, but it's the first thing that came to my mind. It's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm just trying to think of anything else. Anything else that comes to my mind when I think about a trauma from childhood. Um, I mean, I'm not saying I was the nicest of people at times. I mean, I'm starting to remember kind of something I've done to my dad actually when he kind of didn't get me something. I kind of kicked him in the leg. I'm sort of thinking about horrible things that I did. You know what I mean? So I'm not
But that's
exactly.
being a child, though, isn't it? It's not
Yeah,
being an adult. That's just being a child. When you think about things like that, you think, oh, that wasn't a very nice thing to do. But you didn't take anybody's life as such. You know what I mean? Or
yeah,
kind of hurt them forever. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Trauma in whatever capacity that comes in. I mean, one of the things that comes in terms of what could be trauma is you losing your mum at a very young age, as you mentioned the Bible studies, that would be considered a trauma. How old was you when you lost your parent? Can you recall?
That is so true. Because when I'm talking about childhood, I'm sort of thinking about uh, young kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That was. Yeah. And it's funny how sometimes someone has to remind you of something. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
But yeah, that was absolutely devastating. Absolutely, absolutely devastating. I mean, I was
yeah,
13 years old. What was
yeah,
hard about that? Because I'm sort of jumping, because when I was thinking about childhood, I'm just sort of thinking like 1 to 7, that kind of age. But
yeah,
yeah, 13 years old, and it was just before I was going to do my exams. Because thinking back, there's certain exams you do before you go to secondary school. I think I was in
that's right.
primary
Yeah,
school, and I had to get,
yeah,
you know, and I didn't think I was going to get through the exams. I do remember actually sort of being told, phone call came, and then being told my mum had passed away, and I was just screaming. I was just
yeah,
on the floor, just dragging
mm,
myself across the floor, screaming, uncontrollably. I'm actually
yeah,
visualizing it now. I was in that same house, we're on the gardens. Um, yeah, I couldn't be controlled at that time. I was just on the floor. I was just thinking, it can't be. It's it just cannot be. Do you know what I mean? Um,
it's amazing, really, in the sense that when I mean, I lost my mum when I was what you would be considered an adult. You know what I mean? I lost my dad when I was an adult. And it just goes to show there's an aspect when you lose a parent, you almost feel like an orphan, no matter how old you are. But
yeah,
being an adult, you would have had a bit of your life more established, wouldn't you? You know what I mean? As
yeah,
opposed to being a child where you still need that kind of navigation that makes you feel even more lost than what you would as an adult. You'd get up, you'd go to work, you'd get up, you'd see to the child if you had children. You know, you do all of them things because they're your kind of mainstays of what you do. But being younger, it's you haven't established your life yet. You're en
yeah.
route to establish that, and to feel lost at that time is harder than what it would be as an adult. The emotional aspect isn't any easier, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
uh, I just think as an adult you're just a bit more established that you'll get up and go and do every day, whereas
Yeah.
with a you've still got your emotional development to go and you've still got navigation to go. It's a lot more difficult, you know.
I just don't know how I coped, to be honest. I really don't know how I coped with it.
How did you cope? Do you recall?
Everything was hard. Everything was hard. I'm just trying to think of, because we were skint, you know, everything
Yeah,
was difficult. Getting the money together for the funeral was difficult,
yeah,
having to actually go and see my mum, you know. I don't remember. Okay, yeah, we were, the whole family wasn't, but we were supposedly Jehovah Witness. And that's another reason why I didn't overly like our religion, to be honest,
yeah.
and the Bible studies that we did, because of the things that you couldn't have, you couldn't celebrate birthdays, couldn't celebrate Christmas, things like that.
Mm.
And yeah,
It's funny because you know what I find with religion, in my understanding of what I believe it to be, feel it to be, whatever you wanna, it's they never understand the perception of the person that they're trying to teach about religion and get them to open up about it. So, say for instance, going back to you being a 6, 7 year old, where you're a bit opposed to it because 9 times out of 10 they're talking at you as opposed to trying to garner your understanding and bring you forward in that light so that you can have they always talk about having a relationship with God. You have your relationship with God, which is individual, but then the pastor wants you to have a relationship through him. Yeah. So you
yeah,
go to have your relationship with God. And based on that, they would then want you to understand it the way that they want you to understand it and not necessarily how you would understand it. So somebody who 6 or 7 who was teaching you, to
yeah.
me, didn't recommend to do that. Just palmed you off and said that, oh, you're walking in the footsteps of the devil, as opposed to gaining your interest in it because everybody learns differently, you know, everybody learns the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like you said, going back to Jehovah's Witness, they have their set rules and guidelines of what you should follow and why you should follow it. And, you know, for you being a child, you may have wanted to, you know, I want to celebrate my mum. I want to celebrate all these things, and I can't do it because of religion. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And she
So
was so
it's
dedicated to it. Sorry.
perfectly
No, go
honest.
for it.
I don't follow any religion.
She was so dedicated as well, and it just felt so cruel. And I remember it being difficult to actually find a place that will do the funeral for
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witness. Everything was difficult. And I'm thinking, why is it so difficult? My mum really was, followed this to the letter.
Mm.
So that was one thing. And then I don't know if it's in the Jehovah's Witness religion, but I know we had to, for some reason, go and see her. Well, it's
Yeah.
probably in most religions. And that was another thing that I didn't really want to do that, because your mum or any relative, parent, whatever, doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
It was just a person just looked different. I'm just looking at that face now, and it's a different face. Everything was different. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't sleep for a little while after that. So there was that. Um, but yeah, in terms of coping, I just really, it's fuzzy. I just don't know how I dealt with it. I think it was friends that I had around. You were around me then, Mel. You were around me then. Because
Yeah.
remember, I moved to the area when I was quite young, and I think you possibly moved in after, possibly, unless you were there before. But you and I became friends. I
I
became
moved in
friends with all of
after
your
it, so
family. Um, yeah,
yeah,
and I think that's probably what helped me through, to be honest. The company of
yeah,
friends like you.
yeah. I understand that. It's very difficult, you know, as you say, going through that kind of thing and understanding. I
Your lights are
remember.
tad low.
Oh, sorry. Let me just.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember much surrounding the time of mum passing. I do remember the day of the funeral, though. I didn't actually get to go because it was wearing all black, wasn't it? And I don't recall having anything all black.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it was. I do recall it. I do recall it being a sad time. You know what I mean?
and I don't
At
want to
that.
bring up bad memories or anything, but I remember. I won't say which one. It's not fair. One of your family members did go, um,
One like
and I
me.
remember that person was standing behind me laughing.